It was just another Thursday when my Wi-Fi became the unlikely Cupid in what would become the most unexpected romance of my life. Hi everyone, I'm Alex, and I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here we are. I've always been the kind of person who keeps to themselves, not because I don't like people, but because social interactions drain me faster than my phone battery on a road trip. My apartment in Westview Heights had been my sanctuary for nearly 3 years. It's a modest building, nothing fancy, but it has character, exposed brick walls, large windows that let in just the right amount of light, and most importantly, neighbors who respect the unspoken rule of minimal interaction. That was until Jake moved in next door about 6 months ago. From the moment he arrived, Jake was like a burst of color in our otherwise monochrome hallway. He's the type who knows everyone's name within a week, who brings homemade cookies to the building manager just because, and who somehow manages to look put together even when taking out the trash at 7 a.m. I'd see him in passing, offering a quick nod or a half smile, which was my equivalent of rolling out the welcome wagon. He'd always respond with this bright, genuine smile that made me wonder if he was actually happy to see me or if he was just one of those perpetually cheerful people. Either way, I found myself taking the stairs more often, just to avoid the awkward elevator small talk that I knew I'd fumble through. Let me paint you a clearer picture of my life before Jake entered it properly. My days had a comfortable rhythm: wake up, work from home as a graphic designer, order in or cook something simple, maybe call my sister once a week, and spend evenings lost in books or binge-watching shows that didn't require too much emotional investment. Weekends weren't much different, except I might venture out to a coffee shop with my laptop, convincing myself that being around people without actually interacting with them counted as socializing. It wasn't exciting, but it was safe, predictable, and entirely within my comfort zone. Now, about Jake, he seemed to be my polar opposite. From what I could gather through our building's paper-thin walls and occasional glimpses, his life was full of people, laughter, and spontaneity. He hosted game nights that I could hear through the walls, had friends dropping by unannounced, and even his phone conversations sounded like he was catching up with long-lost friends rather than just making appointments or ordering food. There was something magnetic about him that I couldn't quite understand but definitely noticed. And trust me, noticing wasn't something I did often when it came to neighbors. The day everything changed started like any other. I was deep into a design project, headphones on, completely in the zone, when there was a knock at my door. Not just any knock, it was urgent, persistent, the kind that says, "I know you're in there, and this can't wait." I considered ignoring it, as I often did with unexpected visitors, but something made me get up and answer. And there he was, Jake, looking slightly disheveled, a laptop tucked under his arm, and wearing an expression that was halfway between desperate and apologetic. "Hey, Alex, right?" he said, as if we hadn't been nodding at each other in hallways for months. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my Wi-Fi just went down, and I have this incredibly important video conference in 15 minutes. My career might literally depend on this call. Is there any chance I could use your internet? I promise I'll be quiet as a mouse, and I'll owe you big time." There was something about the way he asked, earnest, a little vulnerable, completely different from his usual confident demeanor, that made it impossible to say no. Plus, he knew my name, which was more than I could say for most of my neighbors. So against every introverted instinct in my body, I stepped aside and let him in. "Sure, come in. The password is on the router," I said, trying to sound casual, as if I had people in my apartment all the time. In reality, my heart was racing at this unexpected social situation. What were the rules here? Should I offer him something to drink? Make small talk? Go back to work and pretend he wasn't there? Jake's relief was palpable as he entered, his smile returning to full wattage. "You're a lifesaver, seriously. I've been preparing for this presentation for weeks, and of course, technology decides to fail me now." He looked around my apartment, and I suddenly saw it through his eyes, minimalist to the point of Spartan, with books as the primary decoration. "Nice place. Very focused." I mumbled a thanks and pointed him toward the dining table, which doubled as my workspace when I wasn't using my desk. As he set up his laptop, I retreated to my desk, hoping to dive back into my project and forget about the stranger in my living room. But concentration was impossible. I was acutely aware of his presence, the way he tapped his fingers silently on the table as his computer booted up, the faint scent of his cologne that somehow made my apartment smell more alive, the occasional glance he threw my way with a grateful smile. The minutes before his call started were filled with the most awkward small talk I'd engaged in for months. "So, graphic design, huh?" he asked, nodding toward my monitor. "That's cool. I always wished I had artistic talent. It's more technical than artistic sometimes, I replied, surprising myself by actually elaborating. But yeah, I enjoy it. What do you do? The question felt foreign on my tongue. I rarely cared enough to ask. I'm in environmental consulting, he said, his eyes lighting up in a way that told me he genuinely loved his job. Helping companies reduce their carbon footprint, implement sustainable practices, that kind of thing. Today's call is with a potential major client who could really make a difference if they commit to our recommendations. Before I could respond, his computer chimed with an incoming call notification. That's them, he whispered, shooting me an apologetic look before answering with a professional. Jake Henderson here. Thank you for making time today. I tried to return to my work. I really did. But there was something captivating about watching Jake in his element. He was passionate, articulate, and had this way of explaining complex concepts so clearly that even I, someone who had never given much thought to corporate sustainability, found myself interested. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I caught myself smiling at his animated hand gestures and the way his eyes crinkled when he made a point he was particularly proud of. The call lasted just over an hour, during which I pretended to work while actually listening to every word. When he finally signed off with promises of follow-up materials and next steps, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than before. That went well, I offered, not knowing what else to say. Jake's face broke into the biggest smile I'd seen yet. It went better than well. They're on board. This is huge, Alex. And it wouldn't have happened without you. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that was unfairly attractive. I owe you coffee for a month. Or dinner. Or both. I felt my cheeks warm at his gratitude, which seemed disproportionate to the simple act of sharing Wi-Fi. It's really no big deal. Neighbors should help each other out, right? Absolutely, but still, you saved me today. At least let me buy you a coffee sometime. There was something in his tone, a hint of something beyond simple gratitude, that made my heart skip. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking on my part. Sure, I heard myself say, even as my brain screamed about the dangers of social commitments. Coffee sounds nice. What happened next still surprises me when I think about it. Instead of just thanking me again and leaving, Jake stayed. He asked about the project I was working on, and I found myself explaining it in detail, the client's needs, my creative process, the challenges of balancing artistic vision with practical requirements. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. Before I knew it, we'd been talking for another hour. I should probably let you get back to work, he finally said, glancing at his watch. But this was really nice, Alex. I've wanted to get to know you better since I moved in. But you always seemed so contained. I wasn't sure if you'd be open to friendship. His honesty caught me off guard. I'm not great at the whole socializing thing, I admitted. It's not personal. Well, for what it's worth, you're better at it than you think. He packed up his laptop and headed for the door, then paused. Oh, I should probably give you my number. You know, in case your Wi-Fi ever goes down and you need to return the favor. There was that smile again, slightly mischievous but warm. We exchanged numbers, and as he left, I felt something shift in my carefully ordered world. It wasn't just that I'd had an unexpected social interaction that hadn't been completely draining. It was that, for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the next one. The coffee Jake had promised happened the following Saturday. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, settling on what I hoped was a casual but not trying too hard look. The cafe he chose was a small, independent place a few blocks from our building, cozy without being cramped, busy enough that silence wouldn't be awkward, but quiet enough for conversation. I come here almost every day, Jake confessed as we settled into a corner table with our drinks. The owner, Maria, knows my order by heart now. They make the best lavender honey latte in the city. I've lived here for 3 years and never even noticed this place, I admitted, looking around at the warm wooden decor and local art on the walls. That's the thing about cities, Jake said thoughtfully. There's so much life happening all around us, but it's easy to get tunnel vision, only seeing the path between home and work and maybe the grocery store. He took a sip of his latte. I made it a goal when I moved here to try one new place every week. It's how I discovered gyms like this. His approach to life was so different from mine, intentional exploration versus comfortable routine, but there was something appealing about it. That's a good system, I said. What's been your favorite discovery so far? Jake's face lit up at the question, and he launched into a story about a tiny bookstore/tea house he'd found tucked away in an alley, run by an elderly couple who had met in a library 50 years ago. The way he told the story, full of small, Vivid details and genuine appreciation for the people he'd encountered made me see the city through new eyes. It also made me wonder what other experiences I'd been missing by staying safely within my comfort zone. Our coffee date. Was it a date? I wasn't sure, stretched into lunch, and then a walk through a nearby park I'd only ever passed by. Jake had a way of drawing me out, asking questions that made me think and really listening to my answers. By the time we returned to our building, the sun was setting, and I realized I'd spent the entire day with someone without once checking the time or making an excuse to leave early. This was fun, Jake said as we stood awkwardly in the hallway between our apartments. We should do it again sometime. I'd like that, I replied, and meant it. Over the next few weeks, some time turned into regular occurrences. We'd grab dinner after work, or watch a movie on one of our couches, or just talk over tea late into the evening. Jake introduced me to his favorite spots around the city, and I shared my more introverted pleasures, like the perfect reading nook in my apartment or the satisfaction of completing a complex design. We were different in so many ways, but those differences became complementary rather than divisive. It was during one of our movie nights, about a month after the Wi-Fi incident, that something shifted again. We were watching some indie film Jake had insisted I needed to see, sitting closer than strictly necessary on my couch. The protagonist was going through a crisis of identity, torn between what was expected of him and what he truly wanted. I get that, I said quietly, not really meaning to speak aloud. Jake paused the movie. Get what? I hesitated, not used to sharing personal thoughts so freely. But something about the dimly lit room and Jake's patient expression made it feel safe. That feeling of being caught between who you are and who you think you should be. I spent a lot of my life trying to be more outgoing, more normal, I guess. It took me years to accept that being introverted isn't something I need to fix. Jake turned to face me fully. I can see that. For what it's worth, I think who you are is pretty great. Even though I'm basically your social opposite? I asked with a small laugh. Especially because of that, he said seriously. You notice things others miss. You think before you speak. When you do share something, it matters. He paused, then added more softly, and you listen, really listen, which is rarer than you might think. His words warmed something in me that I hadn't realized was cold. Thanks, I managed, suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting. You're not so bad yourself, for an extrovert. Jake laughed, breaking the tension, and we returned to the movie. But something had changed, a door had opened between us that couldn't be closed again. I found myself noticing things I'd been trying not to notice, the way his hand sometimes brushed mine when we walked, how his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking, the fact that he'd started texting me good morning every day. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I hadn't been in a relationship for years, partly by choice and partly by circumstance. The idea of letting someone in that completely was daunting, especially someone like Jake who seemed to have so much more experience with people and relationships. What if I wasn't enough? What if my need for alone time became a problem? What if this was all in my head, and he just saw me as a friend? These questions kept me awake at night, analyzing every interaction, every text, every smile for hidden meanings. I was so caught up in my own head that I almost missed the signs that Jake was dealing with his own insecurities. It came to a head one evening when we were cooking dinner together in his apartment. I was chopping vegetables while he stirred something on the stove that smelled amazing. Music played softly in the background, and the whole scene felt so domestic, so natural, that it scared me a little. Can I ask you something? Jake said suddenly, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Of course, I replied, setting down my knife. He kept his eyes on the pot he was stirring. Are we just friends, Alex? Because sometimes it feels like we might be more than that, but then other times I'm not sure, and I don't want to misread things or make you uncomfortable. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. This was the moment to be honest, to take a risk. But fear gripped me, fear of rejection, fear of change, fear of the unknown. I don't know, I said finally, which was both the truth and a coward's answer. What do you want us to be? Jake turned to face me then, his expression open and vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. I like you, Alex, as more than a friend. I have since before the Wi-Fi incident, if I'm being completely honest. But I also know you value your space and your routine, and I would never want to disrupt that if it's not what you want to. His honesty deserved honesty in return. I like you too, I admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing. But I'm scared. I haven't done this in a long time, and you're so good with people, so experienced. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you when you realize how much alone time I need, or how awkward I can be in social situations. Jake's smile was gentle as he moved closer to me. Alex, I'm not looking for a carbon copy of myself. I like you because you're you, thoughtful, creative, quietly funny, and yes, introverted. That's not a flaw. It's just part of who you are. He hesitated, then added, and as for experience, my last relationship ended badly because he couldn't understand why I needed so much social interaction. We're all just figuring this out as we go. The casual mention of he confirmed what I'd suspected but hadn't known for sure. It was another barrier down between us. So what do we do now? I asked, feeling both terrified and hopeful. We could start by being honest about what we want and need, Jake suggested. And maybe with this. He leaned in slowly, giving me plenty of time to back away if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. Instead, I met him halfway. Our first kiss was gentle, questioning, a conversation without words. When we pulled apart, Jake's smile was brighter than I'd ever seen it. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he confessed. Me too, I admitted. I just didn't know if you felt the same way. For someone so observant, you can be remarkably oblivious, he teased, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I've been flirting with you since the day I borrowed your Wi-Fi. The realization made me laugh. I thought you were just being nice. I am nice, he protested. But I'm especially nice to cute guys I'm interested in. The evening took on a new dimension after that, the same activities but with a different understanding between us. We still cooked dinner, still ate together and talked about our days, but now there were casual touches, shared smiles with new meaning, and a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. It wasn't all smooth sailing from there, of course. We had our first argument a week later when Jake invited me to a large party without warning me first. I felt ambushed and withdrew, which hurt his feelings because he'd been excited to introduce me to his friends. It took a long conversation for us both to understand the other's perspective. I needed preparation time for social events, and he needed to feel like I was willing to be part of his world sometimes. We worked out a system after that. Jake would give me advance notice about social events, and I would commit to attending some of them, with the understanding that I might need to leave early or take breaks. In return, I introduced him to the joy of quiet evenings teaching him that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen in silence. There were other challenges too. Jake's ex called him one night, drunk and wanting to reconcile, which brought up insecurities on both sides. I had a deadline-induced meltdown that tested Jake's patience with my stress response. We navigated family introductions. His parents were warm and welcoming. My sister was cautiously optimistic but protective. Through it all, we kept talking, kept trying to understand each other, kept choosing to work through the difficult moments. 6 months after the Wi-Fi incident, Jake's lease was up for renewal. We were having dinner at my place when he brought it up. So, I need to decide about my apartment by next week, he said, trying to sound casual but not quite succeeding. Are you thinking of moving? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach at the thought. That depends, he replied, setting down his fork. What would you think about me moving in here? Or us finding a new place together? Something that could be ours from the start. The question hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, the idea of sharing my space permanently with anyone would have sent me into a panic. But now, looking at Jake across my dining table, the same table where he'd set up his laptop that first day, I tried to imagine going back to life without him. I couldn't. My apartment already felt empty when he wasn't in it. I think, I said slowly, that we would need a place with 2 bedrooms. So I can have a home office and somewhere to retreat when I need alone time. Jake's face broke into that sunshine smile I'd come to love. Does that mean yes? It means yes, I confirmed, returning his smile. But fair warning, I'm particular about kitchen organization. And I hog the blankets, he countered. But I make up for it by being an excellent breakfast cook. I think we can work with that. Looking back now, it's amazing how something as simple as a Wi-Fi outage could change the course of 2 lives so completely. If Jake's internet hadn't failed that day, if I hadn't answered my door, if we hadn't taken those first tentative steps toward friendship and then something more, how different things might have been. They say love finds you when you're not looking for it, and in my case, that was literally true. I wasn't looking for a relationship, wasn't even looking for a friend. But sometimes the universe has other plans, delivered in the form of a charming neighbor with a technological emergency and a smile that could power a small city. So if there's a lesson in all of this, maybe it's that sometimes the best things in life happen when your carefully constructed routines are interrupted. Maybe it's that people who seem like your opposite can actually be your perfect complement. Or maybe it's just that you should always have a good Wi-Fi password, because you never know who might need to borrow it and what might happen next. Total_char_count. 18,687.